Supreme Commander Zyler stared at the holographic display, the burning red nodes representing yet another lost sector to the relentless advance of the architects. The imposing alien leader's scaled skin had dulled with age, but the eyes remained sharp, watching the strategic simulation play out with the same devastating result for the 20th time. Every model predicts the same outcome, Science Officer Lyra said, her slender form gliding between the shimmering projections. Unlike Zyler, whose body was battle-hardened and rigid with military precision, Lyra moved with fluid grace. The architects adapt too quickly to our standardized formations. They learn, they evolve, they counter. The Keystone system cannot fall, Zyler said, voice like grinding stone. If it does, our supply lines to the outer rim collapse. Half our fleet will be cut off. Around them, the command center of the Galactic Alliance's flagship hummed with activity. Technology centuries beyond what humans had achieved worked in perfect harmony, controlled by a species who had mastered interstellar travel while Earth was still fumbling with its first computers. The Alliance had seemed unstoppable until the architects appeared. The models are clear, fleet strategist Zorax added, an edge of defeat in his voice. The architect's shield network around Keystone is impenetrable. Each node powers the others in a predictable but unbreakable pattern. Every predictable pattern has a vulnerability, Lyra said quietly, almost to herself. Zyler turned, furrowing the ridge above his eyes. You have a suggestion, Science Officer? Lyra hesitated, then pulled up a new holographic display. I've been analyzing species we've recently made contact with. There's one, primitive by our standards, but with a most unusual military history. The hologram shifted to show Earth, a blue marble suspended in blackness. Humans, Zyler said with undisguised disdain. We only established diplomatic relations with them 2 planetary cycles ago. They barely have interplanetary travel. Yes, but their military history is fascinating. Lyra expanded the display to show a timeline of human warfare. They frequently employ tactics that defy logic, strategies that by all reasonable analysis should fail, yet sometimes succeed spectacularly. You cannot be suggesting. I am, Supreme Commander. Lyra's voice grew firmer. The architects defeat us because they can predict our logical, optimal military responses. They cannot be outthought by conventional means. But humans. She gestured to the display showing Earth's chaotic military history. Humans might provide exactly the element of unpredictability we need. Zyler paced the command deck, the concept clearly disturbing him. Military operations required precision, optimization, certainty, all things the Alliance excelled at. The idea of introducing chaos seemed anathema to everything they stood for. It would be a last resort, he finally said. We are at our last resort, Commander, Lyra replied. 2 days later, Captain Sarah Jenkins of the Earth Coalition Forces stepped onto the gleaming deck of the Alliance flagship, her small team of specialists behind her. Jenkins was not what the Alliance representatives expected. A compact woman with short-cropped dark hair and eyes that crinkled at the corners, suggesting frequent laughter. But those eyes also carried the hardness that came only from genuine combat experience. Welcome aboard the Supreme Vessel, Zyler said stiffly, towering over the human visitors. Your transport was adequate. Smoothest ride I've ever had. Jenkins replied with a casual smile that seemed to perplex the Alliance commander. Though your artificial gravity takes some getting used to. Jenkins' team consisted of just 4 specialists. Technical Officer Raj Patel, a skeptical engineer who kept eyeing the Alliance technology with both suspicion and fascination. Flight Lieutenant Miguel Reyes, whose relaxed posture belied his reputation as Earth's most daring pilot. Dr. Eleanor Chun. No, wait. Dr. Eleanor Hayes, a calm tactical analyst whose quiet demeanor masked one of Earth's sharpest strategic minds, and security specialist Daria Volkova, whose alert eyes never stopped, scanning their surroundings. Lyra stepped forward, genuine curiosity in her expression. We appreciate your willingness to assist, Captain. Though I must warn you, our command structure views this consultation with considerable skepticism. "We're used to skepticism," Jenkins replied. "But I'm curious why you called us specifically. Your message mentioned our unique perspective might help." Zyler gestured them toward a briefing room. "We face an enemy that perfectly counters every logical strategy we deploy. Your species has a history of illogical military decisions that occasionally yield results. Science Officer Lyra believes this perspective may provide value." Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "You called us because we're unpredictable." "I called you because you're our last resort," Zyler corrected, his tone making clear this wasn't a compliment. The briefing that followed laid bare the Alliance's desperate situation. The Architects, a hive-minded species whose technology seemed to operate on pure mathematical principles, had pushed back Alliance forces across multiple sectors. Their shield network protecting the Keystone system was their most impressive achievement. A series of interconnected energy nodes that powered an impenetrable barrier, operating on principles so logical and predictable that they were impossible to disrupt. "Show me your attack simulations," Jenkins requested after absorbing the initial briefing. Lyra brought up the holographic models. Perfect formations of Alliance ships, executing textbook maneuvers against the shield network. Every simulation ended the same way, with Alliance forces decimated and the shields intact. "You're giving them exactly what they expect," Technical Officer Patel said, breaking his silence. "Your attack patterns are too clean. Our formations are optimized for maximum efficiency," an Alliance strategist responded, offense clear in his tone. Jenkins studied the hologram of the Keystone system, focusing on a small Alliance outpost near the edge of the sector. "This facility, you've evacuated it already?" "Outpost K-12, yes," Lyra confirmed. "It was deemed strategically expendable given our resource constraints." A slow smile spread across Jenkins' face. "What if we overload it?" "Overload?" Zyler's translator struggled with the concept momentarily. "You mean destroy our own facility?" "Not just destroy it," Jenkins clarified, eyes alight with the beginnings of a plan. "Overload its power core in a specific way to create an unpredictable energy surge that might temporarily disrupt the Architect's shield nodes." The Alliance command staff stared at her in stunned silence. "That would waste a valuable facility for no tactical gain," Zyler finally said. "The shield nodes are designed to compensate for energy fluctuations." "For predictable fluctuations," Dr. Hayes spoke up, her voice calm but commanding attention. "What Captain Jenkins is suggesting is creating a chaotic energy pattern, something the Architect's logical systems might struggle to process quickly enough." "This is absurd," Fleet Strategist Zorax interjected. "You would sacrifice a strategic asset on the mere possibility of creating temporary disruption?" "Sometimes you have to be willing to lose something to gain something greater," Jenkins replied. "Earth's military history is full of examples where commanders made seemingly irrational sacrifices that led to victory. Your species' history is also full of catastrophic defeats from such gambles," Zyler countered. "True," Jenkins acknowledged. "But right now, your models show 100% chance of defeat using conventional tactics. I'm offering a non-zero chance of success with unconventional ones." The debate raged for hours. Jenkins and her team walked the Alliance command through historical Earth battles where unconventional tactics had prevailed against superior forces. The feigned retreats of Mongol armies, the weather-dependent invasion at Normandy, guerrilla warfare that had defeated technologically superior opponents time and again. Lyra, alone among the Alliance leadership, seemed receptive. She ran simulations based on Jenkins' proposal, showing that while highly improbable, there was a mathematical possibility that a sufficiently chaotic energy surge could temporarily destabilize sections of the shield network. "Even if this works," Zyler said, his resistance weakening as reports came in of another Alliance defeat in a neighboring sector, "a momentary disruption gains us nothing." "That's where Lieutenant Reyes comes in," Jenkins said, nodding to the pilot who had been unusually quiet during the proceedings. "If you give us a fast ship, modified to our specifications, we can exploit those momentary gaps." "One ship," Zorak scoffed, "against the entire Architect fleet?" The architects expect large formation attacks. Reyes spoke up, his casual demeanor gone, replaced by focused intensity. They won't have countermeasures prepared for a single ship, doing things no sane pilot would attempt. The pressure mounted as reports arrived of Keystone's outer defenses weakening. After a final contentious meeting of the Alliance High Command, Zyler reluctantly authorized Jenkins' plan, with minimal resources and a clear expectation of failure. "I hope your species' capacity for a logical action yields results, Captain," he said as they prepared to depart. "Because by all rational analysis, you're embarking on a suicide mission." Jenkins smiled. "Sometimes the best way to survive is to do the thing your enemy is absolutely certain you won't do." Over the next 48 hours, the human team worked feverishly to modify Alliance technology in ways that horrified the Alliance engineers. Patel rerouted safety systems, disabled predictability algorithms, and introduced what he called controlled randomness into the ship's navigation systems. When one Alliance engineer protested that he was making the systems less efficient, Patel simply replied, "Exactly." The modified cruiser looked like a standard Alliance vessel from the outside, but inside it had been transformed into something that blended Alliance technology with human unpredictability. Jenkins named it the Wild Card. As they made final preparations, Lyra approached Jenkins in the hangar bay. "Our engineers believe your modifications reduce the ship's combat effectiveness by 23%, she said. "But they make us 100% less predictable," Jenkins countered. "The architects won't know what to expect." Lyra hesitated. "I've studied your species extensively since suggesting this alliance. Your capacity for self-sacrifice is remarkable. Not always logical, but remarkable nonetheless." "Logic isn't everything," Jenkins said. "Sometimes you need to follow your gut." "Gut." Lyra's translator struggled with the idiom. "Intuition," Jenkins clarified. "That feeling when something seems right even when you can't explain why." "A dangerous way to make military decisions," Lyra observed. "Sometimes danger is exactly what you need," Jenkins replied with a grim smile. The mission launched with little ceremony. The Wild Card departed the Alliance flagship, accompanied by a minimal escort that would peel away before they reached Outpost K-12. On the command deck, Zyler watched their departure with a mix of doubt and desperation. "They will fail," Zorax said beside him. "But perhaps they will fail in a way that provides useful data." "Perhaps," Zyler replied, unable to shake the feeling that he was witnessing either the beginning of the end or something entirely unexpected. The journey to Outpost K-12 was tense and quiet. Jenkins' team made final preparations while Alliance liaison officers watched in growing horror as the humans introduced further modifications to the ship's systems, rerouting power in ways that violated every safety protocol, setting up feedback loops that could potentially damage the vessel itself. "Are all human military operations this chaotic?" one liaison officer asked Hayes as she programmed a series of irregular energy pulses. "Only the successful ones," she replied without looking up from her work. As they approached the abandoned outpost, the massive shield network around Keystone came into view, a shimmering barrier of energy powered by dozens of nodal stations in predictable orbital patterns. Beyond it, the Architect fleet moved with mechanical precision, their ships like perfectly coordinated insects. Entering outpost range, Reyes announced from the pilot's seat, his hands dancing over the modified controls. "Architect patrol ships have not altered course. They're ignoring us as expected. They think we're just salvaging equipment," Jenkins confirmed. "Start the power-up sequence, Raj." Patel initiated the sequence they designed. Not a simple overload, but a cascading series of system failures carefully orchestrated to create maximum energy disruption in unpredictable patterns. The outpost reactor began to destabilize, not in the clean, predictable way that Alliance protocols would dictate, but in a messy, chaotic human way. "Energy readings are spiking," Hayes reported, watching the monitors. "The pattern is," she smiled slightly. "Well, there is no pattern. It's beautiful chaos." On the Alliance flagship, Lyra monitored the situation with growing excitement. Energy readings from Outpost K-12 are exceeding all safety parameters, she reported to Zyler. The disruption pattern matches known Alliance protocol. The architects will adapt quickly, Zyler said, but he leaned forward, watching the displays with intense focus. The outpost reactor reached critical levels, energy emissions spiraling outward in unpredictable waves. For a moment, nothing happened. The shield network continued to shimmer, unaffected. "It's not working," Zorak said, unable to hide his satisfaction. Then, like ripples in a pond, the shield network began to flicker. Not a complete failure, but sections of it becoming unstable, blinking in and out in patterns that defied prediction. "The shield nodes are experiencing systemic failures," Lyra reported, voice rising with excitement. "They're attempting to compensate, but the energy patterns from the outpost are too erratic." As the Alliance command watched in stunned silence, the wildcard suddenly accelerated toward the flickering shield barrier, piloted with a recklessness that made even the most seasoned Alliance officers wince. "They can't possibly navigate through those fluctuations," Zorax murmured. "It's suicide." But Reyes wasn't flying with Alliance precision. He was flying with human instinct, reacting to shield fluctuations in real time, zigging when logic said to zag, making split-second decisions that no simulation could predict. "Shield gap at coordinates 327.82. Hayes called out, her calm voice belying the tension of the moment. "I see it," Reyes replied, hands dancing across the controls as he sent the ship into a role that the Alliance engineers had specifically designed their vessels not to perform due to structural stress concerns. The wildcard slipped through a momentary gap in the shield network, alarms blaring as systems strained beyond their design parameters. Behind them, Outpost K-12 finally exploded completely, sending one final wave of chaotic energy through the shield network. Inside the shield perimeter, the wildcard encountered immediate resistance. Architect defense ships, their design reminiscent of crystalline insects, moved to intercept with perfect precision. But they were programmed to counter Alliance tactics, the optimal attack vectors, the standard defensive maneuvers. Reyes flew like no Alliance pilot ever would. He scraped against asteroids to use their gravity wells for slingshot maneuvers. He cut power at seemingly random intervals, creating sensor ghosts that confused the architect's targeting systems. He flew toward danger rather than away from it, using debris from destroyed vessels as shields. "We need to target the primary shield nodes," Jenkins ordered as they evaded the initial defensive wave. "Each one is controlling a section of the network." Lyra's analysis shows they're most vulnerable at the power distribution junctions. The wildcard weaved through the architect defenses, taking hits but still flying, its modified systems operating in ways their designers never intended. When a critical stabilizer was damaged, Patel rerouted power through secondary systems, creating a feedback loop that actually improved maneuverability at the cost of long-term system stability. "We won't need these systems long-term if we're dead," he quipped when Volkova questioned the modification. On the Alliance flagship, the command staff watched in stunned silence as the single human ship accomplished what their entire fleet had failed to do: penetrate the architect defenses and approach the shield nodes. "Their flight pattern is..." "There is no pattern," one analyst reported in confusion. "The architect's predictive systems must be struggling to compensate." "That's the point," Lyra said quietly. "Humans don't always take the optimal path. They take the unexpected one." The wildcard reached the first shield node, launching precision strikes against the power distribution junction. The node flickered and died, creating a cascading failure in that section of the shield network. "One down," Jenkins called as Reyes banked the ship hard, avoiding a swarm of architect interceptors. 3 more to go. The battle intensified as the architects realized the threat. They adjusted tactics, attempting to predict the unpredictable, but Reyes kept changing his approach, sometimes aggressive, sometimes evasive, occasionally seeming to make mistakes only to turn them into advantages. When standard weapons weren't penetrating the second node's defenses, Hay suggested a counterintuitive approach: using the wildcard's own damage systems to create an electromagnetic pulse by deliberately overloading a secondary power coupling. The pulse temporarily disabled the node's defenses, allowing them to destroy it. The third node proved most challenging, heavily defended as the architects began to adapt. The wildcard took significant damage, losing weapons capacity and shield strength. "We need a diversion," Volkova suggested. "Something they won't expect." "What's more unexpected than self-destruction?" Jenkins replied with grim determination. She ordered Patel to prepare the ship's damaged port engine for controlled detonation. When jettisoned toward the architect defenders, it created enough confusion for the wildcard to slip past defenses and destroy the third node. With 3 nodes destroyed, the Keystone planetary defense systems, finally freed from the suppression of the shield network, began to push back against the architect ground forces. The tide of battle shifted. On the Alliance flagship, Xyler watched in astonishment as the planetary defense readings strengthened. "They did it," he said in disbelief. "Their irrational approach actually worked." "Not irrational," Lyra corrected. "Just following a different kind of logic than we, or the architects, understand." The victory at Keystone was significant but temporary. Within days, the architects began adapting to the new threat posed by human unpredictability. They reconfigured their shield networks to be more resistant to chaotic energy fluctuations and deployed new fighter formations designed to counter erratic flight patterns. Their learning, Jenkins observed during a strategy session back on the Alliance flagship. Her team had returned as heroes, though many Alliance officers still regarded their methods with suspicion. "That's what makes them dangerous." "Indeed," Xyler acknowledged. "Our latest intelligence shows new architect constructs being assembled, unlike anything we've seen before." The holographic display showed unusual structures being built at architect strongholds, organic-looking towers with strange energy signatures. "They're not just adapting their tactics," Hayes said, studying the readings. "They're developing countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize chaos." The architect's adaptation came in the form of a technological attack rather than a direct military one. Alliance systems across multiple sectors began experiencing failures, not catastrophic shutdowns, but subtle malfunctions that compounded upon each other. The precision and reliability that the Alliance had always prided itself on became vulnerabilities as logic bombs and AI viruses exploited the predictable architecture of their networks. "They're turning our greatest strength against us," Lyra reported grimly as another command center went offline. "Our systems are too perfect, too logical, making them perfectly predictable targets." Jenkins, now officially appointed as human liaison to Alliance High Command, proposed yet another counterintuitive solution. "We need to make your systems worse," she announced to a room of horrified Alliance officers. "Worse?" Zorax repeated, certain he had misheard. "More chaotic," Jenkins clarified. "Deliberately introduce low-level chaotic algorithms or even dumber AI into your less critical systems. Make them less efficient but far less predictable, and therefore resistant to the architect's logic-based attacks." The proposal ignited fierce debate among Alliance leadership. The idea of deliberately reducing efficiency was almost physically painful to many of them, whose civilization had been built on principles of optimization and perfection. "You're asking us to embrace imperfection," Xyler said, struggling with the concept. "I'm asking you to embrace adaptability," Jenkins corrected. "Perfect systems are brittle. Imperfect ones can bend without breaking." With Xyler and Lyra's growing support, Jenkins and her team began implementing what they called distributed irrationality throughout the Alliance defense network. Critical systems remained untouched, but secondary networks were modified with algorithms that introduced controlled unpredictability. Human-trained pilots began teaching Alliance pilots maneuvers that sacrificed efficiency for unpredictability. When the architects launched their major technological offensive, designed to cripple the Alliance through systematic exploitation of their perfectly logical systems, they encountered something unexpected: systems that behaved erratically, networks that reconfigured in patterns that defied logical prediction, and defense protocols that seemed to make mistakes, but in doing so avoided the traps laid for them. The architect attack faltered, unable to adapt quickly enough to the deliberate chaos the humans had introduced into Alliance operations. Their fighter craft, programmed to counter optimal flight patterns, struggled against Alliance ships, now flying with human-inspired unpredictability. The final confrontation came when Jenkins identified the architect's command nexus, the central hub coordinating their adaptive capabilities. It was heavily defended, not just with ships and shield technology, but with layers of logical defenses designed to counter any approach that followed predictable patterns of attack. Jenkins led the strike force herself, but rather than a direct assault, she employed a strategy of misdirection, false information, and psychological warfare. Using intercepted communications, the Alliance bombarded the architects with contradictory data, deployed ghost fleets that appeared and disappeared at random, and sacrificed pawns in unexpected ways, tactics designed to overload the architect's analytical capabilities. They think in patterns, Jenkins explained to her mixed human Alliance strike team. We need to give them so many patterns that their processing capabilities are overwhelmed. The final strike against the Nexus wasn't entirely military. After penetrating the outer defenses through a series of feints and counterintuitive maneuvers, the strike team uploaded what Hayes had designed as a logical paradox, a piece of code that contained human emotional concepts represented as data, concepts that operated outside the binary framework of architect logic. The command nexus experienced catastrophic logical failures as it attempted to process concepts like sacrifice, hope, and intuition as mathematical constructs. The architect fleet, suddenly without centralized coordination, fell into disarray and was forced to retreat. The Alliance, transformed by human influence, had prevailed. In the aftermath, as Alliance ships secured the Keystone system and pushed the architects back across multiple sectors, Zyler formally thanked Jenkins in a ceremony aboard the flagship. "You were our last resort," he acknowledged, the phrase now carrying respect rather than disdain. "And you have taught us that the Galactic Alliance has much to learn about the power of necessary chaos." "Logic has its place," Jenkins replied, standing proud alongside her team and the Alliance officers who had embraced their methods. "But so does intuition, unpredictability, even inefficiency when applied strategically." The ceremony marked the beginning of a new era of cooperation between humans and the Alliance. Earth was formally invited to join as a full member, valued not despite, but because of their unique approach to challenges. As the celebration concluded, Jenkins found herself standing at a viewport, gazing out at the stars. Lyra joined her, the two now friends despite their differences. "What do you see when you look out there?" Lyra asked. Jenkins smiled. "Infinite possibilities. Challenges we can't predict. Problems we'll solve in ways we haven't imagined yet. An uncertain future," Lyra observed. "The best kind," Jenkins replied. "Because uncertainty means anything is possible." Beyond the viewport, the galaxy spread out before them, vast, mysterious, and full of unpredictable challenges. And for the first time in generations, the Galactic Alliance was prepared to face them not with perfect logic alone, but with the unpredictable strength that comes from embracing the unexpected.